The city of Manila never truly sleeps. At night, the honking of jeepneys blends with the distant hum of karaoke bars, the chatter of workers on night shifts, and the glow of skyscrapers that tower like silent guardians over the restless streets. But on the night of November 14, 2019, one building in Makati held a darkness that would soon ripple far beyond its walls. At the very top of a luxury high-rise, inside the penthouse suite of German tycoon, Hans Kruger neighbors later reported hearing something unusual. A woman's voice, pleading, desperate, sharp enough to cut through the thick glass and steel. Then, the sound of shouting, followed by what some swore were heavy thuds against the walls. For a while, the noise was relentless, like a storm thrashing in a cage. And then silence. Hours later, at around 2 a.m., surveillance cameras in the building's lobby captured Hans himself stepping out of the elevator. He wasn't running. He didn't panic. He walked calmly, wearing a crisp suit jacket over his shoulders as if he had just left a late-night board meeting. He exited the building alone. The next morning, when staff were finally permitted inside the penthouse, they discovered the lifeless body of Marisel Vargas. She was just 22 years old. Her skin was pale, her body thin and frail from a long illness. The official cause of death listed on her medical file read, complications from advanced HIV-related illness. But not everyone accepted that explanation. Friends whispered that she had bruises on her arms and shoulders, marks that didn't fit the quiet story of a disease. Her parents claimed they were discouraged from demanding a full autopsy, and those who knew her best swore she had been terrified in the days leading up to that night. So, the question remains, did Marisel truly die from her illness, or did the man she trusted most hasten her end? This case is not only about wealth and betrayal. It is about the dangers of unchecked power, the vulnerability of the innocent, and the sinister secrets that can lurk behind luxury walls. Now, before we dive deeper into the story, let me ask you this. Have you ever trusted someone so completely, only to realize later that they were hiding something that could destroy you? Because that's exactly what happened here. And listen, if stories like this shake you the way they shake me, don't just watch silently. Hit that subscribe button now, so you never miss another story that might teach you a lesson worth remembering. Otherwise, one day you may hear about another case like this and regret not learning from it. Tonight, we uncover the scandal that shook two nations. Marisel Vargas grew up far from the glittering towers of Makati. She was born in a small town in Quezon Province, where the air smelled of salt from the nearby sea and life revolved around early mornings, long bus rides, and the constant struggle to make ends meet. Her father was a tricycle driver. Her mother sold vegetables at the market. Every peso mattered. Yet even in poverty, Marisel's parents instilled in her a dream. Education is the ticket out. From a young age, she excelled in school, often studying late into the night under the dim light of a borrowed lamp. Her teachers described her as ambitious and disciplined, the kind of student who didn't just want to pass. She wanted to rise above her circumstances. When she was accepted into a top university in Manila, it was both a victory and a heavy burden. Her family scraped together what they could, relying on loans and sacrifices to cover her tuition. Marisel carried not only her own dreams but the hope of her parents and siblings. Landing an internship at Kruger International Holdings felt like fate smiling down on her. This was no ordinary placement. The German-run conglomerate was expanding across Southeast Asia, and being chosen as one of the select interns was like holding a golden ticket. For Marisel, it wasn't just about adding a name to her resume. It was about finally stepping into a world of possibilities, the kind she had only ever read about in glossy magazines. She was 22 years old, fresh-faced, hopeful, and eager to prove herself. When she first entered the company's glass-walled offices in Makati, she felt both awe and intimidation. Here, men and women in designer suits carried themselves with the ease of people who never had to count coins to ride a jeepney. For Marisel, every day was a test. She reminded herself constantly, "Don't fail. Don't waste this chance. Don't let your family down." But little did she know, her big break would lead her into the arms of a man who would change her life forever, and not for the better. Let me ask you, have you ever had a moment when you felt your life was finally turning around? That maybe, just maybe, the struggles you faced were worth it? That's exactly what Marisel felt when she started at Kruger International. She believed she had escaped the shadows of poverty. What she didn't know was that she was stepping straight into a trap carefully set by someone far more powerful than she could imagine. At the heart of this story stood Hans Kruger, a man who embodied both wealth and ruthlessness. Born in Germany, Hans built an empire in real estate that stretched from Berlin to Dubai and eventually into Manila. At 57 years old, he was no stranger to power plays, high-stake negotiations, and the glittering excess that came with unimaginable wealth. Hans lived in a penthouse towering above Makati's skyline, its walls lined with glass, giving him a godlike view of the city below. He was a familiar face in elite golf clubs, private gatherings, and exclusive restaurants where a single meal cost more than what Marisel's family made in a month. To outsiders, he was charismatic, a shrewd businessman who commanded respect. But within inner circles, whispers followed him like shadows. Twice divorced, Hans had a reputation for surrounding himself with women much younger than him. He claimed he enjoyed mentoring them, but those who observed closely saw how often professional guidance blurred into something more intimate. Rumors swirled about interns who received sudden promotions or lavish gifts, only to vanish quietly from the company months later. Hans knew how to keep his image polished. He smiled for photos with politicians, made generous donations to charity, and presented himself as a cultured, worldly man. But beneath the charm, people saw the outlines of something darker. A man who used power as both a weapon and a shield. And it was into this world that Marisel was about to be drawn. It started innocently enough. During a high-profile corporate dinner, Marisel had been assigned to assist with hospitality duties. She made sure glasses were filled, guests were guided to their seats, and everything ran smoothly. That's when Hans noticed her. Witnesses recalled how his gaze lingered too long, his smile too deliberate, as though he had discovered something he wanted to possess. For Marisel, it was overwhelming. Here was the most powerful man in the room, giving her the kind of attention that felt both flattering and intimidating. Within weeks, colleagues noticed changes. She was often summoned to Hans's office for private meetings, sometimes late into the evening. At first, she told a close friend that Hans was charming but intimidating. The gifts came next. A gold necklace, a designer handbag, and even a brand new iPhone that her family could never have afforded. For a girl who grew up watching her parents fight over grocery money, These tokens of wealth were intoxicating. Suddenly, she was riding in luxury cars, dining in five-star hotels, and seeing a world she had only dreamed of. Yet beneath the glitter, there was unease. Hans was possessive, sometimes controlling. He often warned her in a voice that sounded more like a threat than reassurance. "No one must know about us, Marisel. If they do, both our lives will be destroyed." The secrecy weighed on her. She couldn't tell her family. She couldn't confide fully in friends. And yet she couldn't walk away. For Marisel, it was both a whirlwind romance and a gilded prison. Let me ask you something. If you were in Marisel's shoes, what would you have done? Would you have embraced the gifts, telling yourself this was your chance to finally escape poverty? Or would you have walked away, even if it meant going back to a life of struggle? Drop your answers in the comments. I'll be reading because I want to see how you think. By the middle of 2018, the cracks began to show. Marisel, once vibrant and full of energy, started to look different. She lost weight rapidly. She often complained of fatigue. Friends noticed she was getting sick frequently. Fevers, colds, and unexplained dizziness. At first, she blamed it on stress. Juggling her internship, studies, and the secrecy of her relationship was exhausting. But one day, she collapsed at the office. Panic spread as colleagues rushed her to a private clinic. The tests that followed revealed a devastating truth. Marisel was HIV positive. The news shattered her. At just 22, her life had taken a turn she could never have prepared for. Trembling, she confided in Hans, expecting comfort or at least support. But instead of showing concern, he grew defensive, even angry. He insisted she must have gotten it elsewhere. But Marisel knew the truth. She had only ever been with him. Deep down, she suspected Hans had known all along, that he had exposed her and perhaps others before her. Still, under his influence, trapped in the web of manipulation, she stayed. By early 2019, Marisel's condition was worsening. Her once bright, youthful glow was gone, replaced by a pale face that spoke of sleepless nights and quiet suffering. She confided to a close friend that she wanted to leave Hans, that the relationship was no longer something she could endure. But then, unexpectedly, Hans proposed. It wasn't the kind of romantic proposal young women dream about. There were no roses, no grand gestures. Instead, Hans spoke to her in a low, almost commanding tone. He told her marriage would protect her, that it would keep her safe from judgment, and more importantly, quiet. For Marisel, it felt less like a proposal and more like a demand. She hesitated, torn between a desire for freedom and the fear of what Hans might do if she refused. In the end, she agreed. In March of that year, the two were married in a small, private civil ceremony. Only a handful of Hans's close business associates attended. To outsiders, it looked like a fairy tale, the tycoon marrying the beautiful young intern. But those who truly knew Marisel noticed the truth. She didn't look like a woman in love. She looked like someone who had been cornered, her spirit dimmed by a reality she couldn't escape. After the wedding, Hans grew even more controlling. Marisel's contact with friends became rare, her calls to her family shorter and less frequent. She appeared at corporate functions beside Hans, dressed in luxury gowns, smiling for the cameras. But behind closed doors, her health continued to decline, and her fear only grew stronger. If this part makes you angry, Let me know in the comments. Because silence is the weapon people like Hans used to win. Don't be silent. It didn't take long for whispers to circulate among Manila's elite. Hans had always been known for his string of young lovers, but now the rumors took a darker turn. People began to speculate that he was hiding something more than just a secret relationship. Several women who had been romantically linked to Hans in the past began to speak out, though only anonymously. Their stories were eerily similar. Each described a whirlwind romance filled with lavish gifts and promises of care, only to end in sudden illness. Some hinted that they, too, had tested positive for HIV after their relationships with him. The story might have remained buried, but a local journalist caught wind of it. Determined to uncover the truth, he began piecing together testimonies, medical reports, and whispers from inside Kruger International. A draft article was written, one that named Hans Kruger as a man who had knowingly endangered multiple women. But that article never saw the light of day. According to insiders, powerful strings were pulled. The journalist was pressured, the media outlet silenced, and the story suppressed. Yet the draft somehow leaked online, fueling outrage across social media. People began to see Hans not as a powerful businessman, but as a predator hiding behind money and influence. Meanwhile, Marisel's health was deteriorating rapidly. Her once bright future was reduced to days of weakness and nights filled with fear. Friends said she seemed haunted, like someone carrying a secret too heavy to share. If you're still here with me at this point in the story, type "still watching" at 24 minutes in the comments. Let's see how many of us refuse to turn away. On the night of November 14, 2019, the walls of Hans's Makati penthouse became the stage for the final chapter of Marisel's story. Neighbors later testified that they heard shouting. A woman's voice, strained and desperate. The sound of arguments escalating into what seemed like a violent struggle. Then silence. Hours later, at around 2 a.m., Hans was seen leaving the building on surveillance cameras. Calm, composed, alone. He didn't appear like a man whose wife was gravely ill inside his home. He appeared like someone walking away from unfinished business. The next morning, Marisel's lifeless body was discovered in the bedroom. The official report stated the cause of death as complications due to advanced HIV-related illness. But her family and friends were unconvinced. They claimed she had visible bruises, marks that suggested a struggle. They wanted answers, but an autopsy was never fully pursued. Authorities seemed eager to close the case. Was Marisel's death the tragic conclusion of an illness, or was it something darker? Perhaps even deliberate? To this day, that question lingers unanswered. Almost immediately, suspicions of a cover-up began to spread. Why did the authorities move so quickly to declare her death natural? Why was there no deeper investigation? Hans, unsurprisingly, wasted no time. Within weeks, he had left the Philippines, retreating to Germany. Marisel's parents, devastated and desperate, claimed they were pressured into silence. A financial settlement was allegedly offered, and out of fear and survival they accepted. But the silence didn't last. On social media, the story exploded. Hashtags like #JusticeForMarisel trended, with thousands demanding accountability. Women's rights groups rallied around the case, calling it a prime example of exploitation and the dangers faced by vulnerable women in positions of power imbalance. For many, Marisel's story became symbolic. She was no longer just one young woman lost to tragedy. She became the face of countless others who suffered quietly, their voices drowned by wealth and influence. Back in Germany, Hans maintained his innocence. He told anyone who would listen that Marisel's death was simply the result of her illness. He called the allegations against him malicious fabrications. But the whispers didn't stop. Unconfirmed reports suggested that Hans himself was battling advanced HIV, though he never admitted it publicly. Over the next few years, he quietly began selling off portions of his business empire, withdrawing from public appearances. By 2022, rumors spread that he had died in a private clinic, though no official confirmation was ever given. Marisel's family never received the closure they longed for. They lost not just a daughter, but their faith in justice. Yet her story lives on. It remains a chilling reminder of how power can corrupt, how secrets can destroy, and how the vulnerable are often the ones who pay the highest price. Her dream had been simple: to rise out of poverty, to give her family a better life. Instead, she was trapped in a world of deceit and manipulation. And though she is gone, her story continues to echo, warning others of the dangers hidden behind wealth and charm. Her voice was silenced, but the lesson remains. Thank you for watching this far. If you want more stories that uncover the sinister truths hidden behind wealth and power, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. And never forget to share this video, because silence only helps the guilty.